Part of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Hello everyone, welcome to Middle East Now, and first our headlines. From Gaza to Lebanon, what's killed in clashes between Syrian and Turkish forces, and the huge legal action by the victims of October 7th. As the Rafah operation in Gaza almost comes to a close, there's a double message from Israel about Lebanon. The defense minister came back from Washington talking about the need for a diplomatic solution, but leaks and other statements suggest a war is all but imminent. Well, we'll start with I-24 News' Pierre Clochandler in northern Israel with the latest from there. Pierre?
Right, Jacob. I'm not sure that the war is imminent, but definitely the war of attrition between Hezbollah and Israel is going on unabated since October 8th. With sometimes a lull if there is a Muslim festival such as Eid al-Adha 3 weeks ago. But today, for instance, 2 drone infiltrations intercepted over the skies of Lebanon, a targeted killing of an operative from the internal security services. I don't know what this is, a man, a 60-year-old called Mukhieddin Attala, according to Lebanese media, near the city of Tyre in southwest Lebanon, and then a heavy salvo of 15 to 20 rockets in two batches about 2 hours ago in Kiryat Shmona. 2 fell in open field, provoking fire. There was no casualties, and Hezbollah is saying that this is in retaliation to the maneuvering of the IDF in the Gaza Strip, not retaliation about the targeted killing.
Pierre, how does it look over there, the northern part of Israel, a beautiful part of the country, usually at this time of the year, full with tourists? How is it now?
Well, you can see behind me, there are a few cars. They're driving fast. You can see that the traffic lights are blinking. There's no traffic light. There's only 3,000 citizens left in Kiryat Shmona, out of a population of about 24,000. That means 1 in 8 citizens of Kiryat Shmona has remained here. But for the most part, people send their families in hotel rooms in Tiberias, or those who have a bit more money can rent an apartment in Ramat Gan or in Netanya. But for the most part, those who stay are those who are working here, that their families are away, and they just hope for the better. But you hear a lot of talks, you know, in improvised parliaments of 2-3 people, because there are not so many, who are saying, is there going to be a war? No, I don't think there's going to be a war. But we need to have some sort of arrangement because people won't be coming back if Hezbollah is still on the border with Israel. So you hear those arguments that are echoing in the political arena, in the social arena, all around the country. And people, are asking us, "Aren't you afraid?" And I'm answering them the question, and you aren't you afraid? This is the kind of talk that you hear here. And the situation is very sensitive, I would say, very touchy. We heard some artillery fire emanating from the IDF toward targets in Lebanon. And at the beginning you jump because you're not sure if it's an incoming or an outgoing. And the residents here in Kiryat Shmona who are used and trained are telling you, no, this is an outgoing. This is artillery. This is our forces. Okay, and you need to believe them.
Right. Pierre, thank you very much for your report from northern Israel. With us now is Hossein Abdel Hussein to talk about the Lebanese side of things. Hossein, an all-out war will clearly cause immense damage to Lebanon. Where is the Lebanese voice on this? Where are the Lebanese people?
Well, unfortunately, Hezbollah is ruling Lebanon with an iron fist, and any dissenting voices have been either forced to leave the country or to go underground. So there's only one opinion. Whoever is still there is trying to either pretend that they support Hezbollah or say nothing at all. But make no mistake, the fact that they are silent does not mean that they are supportive of Hezbollah's adventure. And by them, I mean most of the Christians, most of the Druze, most of the Sunnis, and a significant part of the Shia. Even the Shia, who are, the followers of Hezbollah, the partisans of Hezbollah, they're not happy that this militia is taking them to a devastating war with Israel.
Why don't we hear them? It's the fear.
Well, there are many factors. Number one would be a fear of physical threats. There have been opponents of Hezbollah who were assassinated in daylight in Lebanon. And number two, the social shaming. No one wants to stand out. There's a stigma that if you oppose the war, then you're either opposing the righteous cause of the Palestinians, or you're opposing Islam, or you're opposing, you name it. So people are really not willing to risk their physical security or to get into fights with Hezbollah and its supporters. And mind you, many of them, their job security, their livelihood depend on the surroundings around them.
This country, Lebanon, is basically controlled by Iran, and too many elements just let it happen. Israel on one hand, the West, maybe France on the other hand, maybe the United States. It just happened, and now it might be too late.
Well, it is unfortunate. Now, I wouldn't go as far as saying that Iran occupies Lebanon, but Iran does control Lebanon completely by buying its own mercenaries, which is the Hezbollah militia. And frankly, this thing did not happen overnight. This has been the culmination of faulty global and especially American policies in Lebanon. In 2008, when there was still a decent opposition to Hezbollah demanding that it disarms, Hezbollah sent its forces to occupy the territories of its allies and maybe kill their leaders. And when the U.S. got into this, they instructed the Hezbollah opponents to talk to Hezbollah and form a national unity cabinet. So this appeasement of Iran and appeasement of Hezbollah has been going for a long time, to the extent that now there's no one living, there's no one there to be the partner of Hezbollah. Hezbollah has no partners. Hezbollah is the only and sole ruler of Lebanon today.
What about the Lebanese army?
Well, the Lebanese army is a reflection of the Lebanese society. So during the civil war, the army was fractured along the lines of the fracturing in the country. So there has been no instance throughout history where the Lebanese army actually stepped up and stopped any militia or protected anything inside of Lebanon. So I don't I can't bet on the army, and we have to keep in mind that many of the leadership of the army, especially what's called the army intelligence, the deuxième bureau, all of this is infiltrated by Hezbollah. So Hezbollah knows what the army wants to do before the army even plans to do it. And even if the army was ever to take on Hezbollah, it's much weaker, it's much less armed and prepared, and it's a losing battle. So I don't see the army as a tool that anyone can use. Of course, anyone here, I mean the Lebanese government, can use to placate Hezbollah or to stand up to Hezbollah and stop it from taking the country to devastation.
Hussein Abdul Hussein, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Israeli-American hostage Hirsch Goldberg Polin is still in Gaza 9 months after October 7th. Recently, new footage of his capture was released. I-24 News' Guy Azriel spoke with his parents.
Here with Rachel and John, parents of Hirsch Goldberg Polin, abducted by Hamas on October 7th. Yesterday, another video, unseen video of his kidnapping was released. Tell us why the decision to release that video and what sort of reactions have you been getting?
The decision was because this is the reality. This is the reality that the hostages are living. This is the reality that the families are living. And so I think it's important that the world see what's happening. Most specifically, it is not for the hostage families. We think about the hostages all day, every day. This is what we do 24/7. But on day 263 today, 262 yesterday, it feels like we need to offer a wake-up call to the world, to decision makers, all the parties involved. People all over the world need to understand that there are still 120 hostages being held, and that these are people. We talk about hostages a little bit, not enough, but the world talks a little bit about these hostages. They are real people with dreams, with aspirations, with families working for them, waiting to hug them. In the case of the video yesterday, that boy who was seen in the video with his hair being pulled, that's Hirsch. He's our son. He's a real person, and all of these hostages are real people who must come home immediately.
It's really torn open a new trauma for me, actually. My daughter and I both didn't sleep last night. It's very difficult to see your son covered in blood with his jagged bones sticking out where he used to have his hand, and to see someone grab him by the hair to pull him up and say, take a selfie with me, or something along those lines. It's just, it reawoke the trauma that is ever present in our lives, and it just added a new dimension to it. And I am thankful that we did receive a video showing that there was some sort of treatment given and that he is alive. But there was something about seeing that day again that sort of rewound our family back to October 7th in a different way than we've been trapped in October 7th, as have all the hostage families. You know, the government has not really been so communicative with us. So we don't really know. We don't know, you know, we hear what you hear. We hear what people read or see in the news, which is not always accurate. We like to believe and remain optimistic and hopeful that our leaders will be wanting to do the right thing, the just thing, the correct thing, without worrying about interests and equities and politics. But it's a terrifying experience knowing that all of our loved ones, all 120 of them, are being pawns in a game that none of us signed up for, none of those hostages signed up for, and certainly none of the families signed up for.
It's day 263, and the hostages, 120 of them, are still there. So the government, all the governments involved, haven't done enough. It's binary. They will have done enough when these hostages are home, when we're hugging them and they're home. Until then, it's not enough. They have to keep on going. What gives me, we're always scratching for optimism. What gives me some optimism right now is polls in Israel. The people are speaking loudly and clearly, and the polls are showing the population of Israel wants a deal. They know that we need these hostages home. We can't move forward until the hostages are home. And I hope that those polls of what the people are saying make its way up to the decision makers and that they understand the same thing.
A few weeks ago, there was talk about perhaps negotiations for a separate deal for the release of the American hostages. Have you been hearing anything from American officials, and what do you know about that deal?
We actually asked Secretary Blinken about that when he was here 2 weeks ago, a couple of days after that story first broke. And he said unequivocally at that time that the Americans are working for the larger deal and that their belief is that the best way to get everyone home is through this large deal that is the Netanyahu deal that was outlined by President Biden. And that's all we know.
Even in Israel, and certainly outside of Israel, I don't believe that people are aware enough and talking enough and working hard enough on the hostage issue. Big picture. Those who are aware of it and are talking about it have been amazing. The strength that we get from people literally all over the world, of all religions, sending us messages of hope and strength and support, and seeing people doing what they can do. Even here in Israel, we have Haredim, ultra-Orthodox, who their contribution is they pray and they learn and they recite Psalms, and we feel that. It strengthens us and it helps us. Other people are calling their elected officials. Everybody's doing what they can. So the people who are working are amazing and strengthening us, and we want to grow that army of people working on this to be even more. Everybody in the world should be asking themselves if they've done enough to get these 120 people who were taken from their lives. Have they done enough today to get these people out?
We've said all along that when people are going through despair and trauma and terror and angst and misery, which is what all of us are going through, there is no judgment and there is no playbook. So there is no unified way to respond to that. Every single person digests this differently and acts upon it differently. And everyone is entitled to that, in our opinion. And I think that that is the opinion of the families at large, that we're not all the same, but we know what we're each going through intimately. And so there can't be any judgment. So what we do might be different from what some other people do. What they do might be different from the next people. But we all have to do what we feel in our gut and heart and soul is the right thing to save our loved ones.
I want to thank you very much, and our hopes and prayers are with you and with Hirsch that you'll see him again soon here in Israel. Toda rabba.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to Turkey. Turkey sided with Hamas all along, but what about Hezbollah? We'll talk with Mehmet Ogucu from Turkey. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Iran is trying to get Turkeys to support Hezbollah. What would be Turkey's reaction to this?
Well, Turkish foreign minister had a talk with the Iranian deputy foreign minister recently. It seems that, of course, Turkey and Iran are trying to coordinate their response to what might emerge as the war between Israel and Lebanon. And Turkey clearly wants to make sure that this war is not going to spread beyond what happened in Gaza. Therefore, it is collaborating with regional countries. This is one of the reasons why President Erdogan and Syrian President Assad will be meeting in Baghdad under the mediation of Iraq. And it's actually Russia is trying very hard to bring two countries together, despite differences. But there's a common interest in terms of border security and the war not spreading into the region. Turkish relations with Hezbollah has been somehow erratic. I don't think that Turkey will support Hezbollah in any way. Turkey sees this as a support to territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon, which is a historically, of course, part of the Ottoman Empire. They have very good relations. And also, one reason is after the defeat of Hamas in Gaza, if Hezbollah will also be defeated in Lebanon, then the fear is Israel might try to spread it all the way to the Turkish border. So this is going to endanger Turkey's strategic security interest. That's one of the reasons perhaps Turkey wants to make a line in Lebanon saying that it's going to stand behind Lebanon. It's not Hezbollah, I think, make this clear.
Yeah, well, that may be pushing it a little bit, Israel on the border of Turkey, but maybe the other way around. Let's say Hezbollah is getting stronger and Syria, as we know, is not a big factor in the area. So Turkey will not be comfortable with Hezbollah on its doorstep, so to speak, right? Yeah, Mr. Gucci, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. I think I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah,
your question.
Yeah, I was saying, to what extent is Hezbollah a threat for Turkey, also in terms of like getting near the border of Turkey when Syria is not a very big factor?
Well, we know that Hezbollah is an arm of Iran in the region. It's also strongly supported by Syria. It helped Assad to help him in the fight during the civil war in Syria. And therefore, when you look at the fundamentals, Hezbollah will not stand as Turkish ally, because Turkey has also strained relations with Iran in many regards. But the common concern that the war might be spreading from Gaza to Lebanon and then to other parts of the region, I think this is what unites countries in the region, especially Arab countries and Turkey. Therefore, I think Turkish support to Lebanon is related to this long-term strategic interest rather than just supporting Hezbollah or anybody else. And also, we saw that Nasrallah threatened Cyprus, saying that there are military operations conducted from Cyprus, and then it will be considered part of the war and as a target. Therefore, as you see, the war has the intention or the tendency to spread in every directions. Hence, Turkish push for putting the Israeli attacks and further move in the region at hold is related to that. So it's not only supporting only Hamas or Hezbollah, but the fear is that Israeli intentions are not limited to Gaza and Lebanon. It might go even further. Then, as I said before, there is a common interest between Iran, Syria, Turkey, and Lebanon to work together. This is how I see it.
Yeah. So bottom line, you're saying that when it comes to Lebanon, Turkey is committed to de-escalation.
Definitely. Although Turkey says it is going to stand behind Lebanon if Israel attacks, if full-out attack against Lebanon, it doesn't spell or figure out clearly what this support would mean. Because whether it's going to be military support, political support, economic support, or arms sale support, so we don't know this. Perhaps it's normal in interstate relationship. You don't put all your cards on the table. But I think as a deterrence, both Iran and Turkey made it very clear that they will stand behind Lebanon. Iran went further, of course, threatening Israel with so many different retaliatory actions. And Hezbollah also says that if it is a war with Israel, there is not going to be any limit to that. So it's going to be a full-out war. And so that is a very dangerous trend in the region where we don't need further escalation. So that's the reason why I say Turkish intentions are more geared towards reducing the tension and limiting Israel's move further. Of course, we recognize Israel's security needs, but we saw that only through military action you cannot achieve that, especially if the actions will have repercussions beyond your borders. Then the countries in the region will take their own countermeasures.
Speaking of which, what about the tensions on the Turkish-Syrian border recently? As we speak, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, after the news that Erdogan might be meeting Assad in Baghdad, so that relations between Turkey and Damascus will be normalized, there was a concern among the Syrian opposition forces, supported by Turkey. And on the border, as you said, there have been some skirmishes, and Turkish flags were burned, and there were anti-Turkish slogans coming. This was quite interesting after what Turkey did for them, as well as hosting more than 6-7 million Syrians in Turkey. So this created an uproar also in Turkey, generating some social tensions we saw in Kayseri, Bursa, and elsewhere. This is also a very dangerous trend, because if there's going to be a peace between Syria and Israel, which will mean the voluntary and orderly return of some Syrians back to their countries, this is very good for Turkey and desperately needed because of its heavy toll on Turkish economy and also political social system. And this created resentment, it seems, among the Syrian opposition forces. So
Right.
Turkey has to deal with this issue as well. The border is a very, very dangerous terrain right now. Russians, Americans support.
Yeah, we've been covering this quite a few times.
Yes,
yeah, we'll leave it at that. Mehmet, I thank you very much. Mehmet Ogucu in Turkey tonight.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
2 more Israeli soldiers died today in Gaza, as many are still wondering what is exactly the government's strategy there. I-24 News' Nicole Sedek reports.
Power work underway in Gaza. These electricians are repairing a main power line in Deir al-Balach, all in a coordinated effort with Israel to boost power to a desalination plant. The new boost could provide 20,000 cubic meters of water daily. That's roughly 20 million liters straight to the humanitarian zone, where some 1.9 million Palestinians are currently seeking shelter. The move not only provides clean water for Palestinian civilians, but is also aimed at preventing diseases that could spread to Israel. However, all the benefits Israel is receiving are also benefits Hamas could be receiving. And it's a decision that's gaining criticism from far-right government officials.
We fell flat on our heads. We are restoring Gaza with our own hands before demobilization, and especially the hospitals, i.e. the terrorist centers. Mr. Prime Minister, stop this foolishness.
This comes one day after another controversial decision, the release of Shifa Hospital Director Abu Salmiya. While there's plenty of evidence pointing to Shifa as a terror hub, there wasn't enough evidence to prove the director was involved in the terror activity. Plus, no space in Israel's prison to keep holding him. But while he was released to Gaza, 120 Israelis are still held captive in the enclave. Making the decision to release Palestinian prisoners, boost power to Gaza, and overall improve the situation on the ground seemed sudden to many within Israel.
A short break, and we'll be right back.
Currently, I'm in a very advanced stage of the disease and in need of a lung transplant. I'm basically supposed to be grounded to my bed and to my oxygen, but after a year of using Z-Medicare, I can say for sure that the long list of the symptoms and the side effect is getting shorter, and I'm able to manage a sane lifestyle, and especially to function as a wife and a mother, and that is priceless.
Made for me.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds. the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
שנמשכת כבר 267
נתניהו, יש לך...
Welcome back to Middle East Now. There's a New York Times report quoting top IDF generals who want a ceasefire in Gaza in order to facilitate a hostage deal. I-24 News' Zach Anders joins us now live with more on that. Let's start with the New York Times report, Zach.
Yeah, a remarkable report. Let's start with, it's a lengthy one, but let's start with some of these Israeli sources. We don't know who they are. They're labeled or told to be generals, and they have that they are of high rank. All of the anonymous sources that are attributed throughout the article. So the New York Times leveraging their credibility, of course, with these high-level sources. These sources are going on to say, one, that troop morale is low among the forces that are inside Gaza, that the war aims are not being met, and that they don't feel as though, or at least the troop morale has not reflected the fact that there has been major progress made inside the Gaza Strip. One of the more telling, and I think the thing that should probably be paid attention to the most is them coming out forward and saying that ammunition shortage is now becoming a factor, that artillery shells are running low. That's a major thing to state at this point in the conflict. And one thing that we've known over the past 2 years in Ukraine, now 3 years, is that the global artillery manufacturers, that the strain that's been pressed on who is building these artillery shells, manufacturing these artillery shells, has become a major concern. We knew that the Israeli stockpile before the conflict had not been tapped into, had not been sold off, even though Ukraine wanted those shells. So Israel held on to this stockpile, but still at this point in the war, 9 months in, to not be able to replenish what has been used is something that was going to be a major concern there. Moving on, the rest of the article stating that and this is the main thing, the main point of the article, that these high-level sources and these IDF leaders are at a point where they feel as though, with the attention needing to turn to the north and Hezbollah, that an end to the conflict, even with Hamas still in charge, is acceptable, or at least something that's being discussed as a possibility. It is really a remarkable thing to hear 9 months into the war. Of course, Netanyahu, the prime minister, as late as yesterday, stating once again, that the complete destruction of Hamas is the war aim here and will take place.
Right. And in the West Bank, where you're at, violence is on the rise.
Yeah, that's right. One Israeli man injured this afternoon. From what we can tell, those injuries non-life-threatening, and from what we've heard, expected to make a recovery. In the aftermath, there's already been as many as 4 Palestinians who have been shot by IDF forces in this area that you see behind me. What is unclear is how these exchanges have taken place. We know that overnight there was a raid, an IDF raid inside Nablus with as many as 15 arrested, and that a weapons cache and lathe used often to manufacture crudely some of the bits of ammunition was destroyed, the IDF says. Now, this shooting that took place this morning into the afternoon hours is a bit confusing to try and understand where exactly this took place. The IDF has not given us an exact location at this point, but stating that the gunfire came from Nablus itself. Nablus behind me is quite a ways away, and from what we've heard by the soldiers in the area, as we've spoken to them, we're nearby where the man was shot. That's a very long distance for a shot to ring out and hit accurately, as this man was told to be walking through the area. So still a lot to piece together here, but again, in the aftermath, 4 Palestinian men shot by IDF forces as they have combed the hillside here. And the important part, we have not received word that the man whoever shot this Israeli man has been apprehended or found. That has not taken place yet.
All right. Zach Anders, thank you very much, live at the West Bank. It's been 10 years, believe it or not, since ISIS, Daesh, came out in Mosul, Iraq, a bloody anniversary. We are joined by Scott Stewart, VP of Intelligence at Torchstone Global. Thank you very much for joining us. Where are we now today, Scott, 10 years after?
Well, I think that it's important that when we think about the Islamic State, Daesh, that we understand that there's really 3 components that we need to examine. We have the base, the core group that's in Syria and Iraq. We have the franchise groups that are around the world, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Afghanistan and other places. And then, of course, we have the grassroots jihadists that are located across the globe and have conducted attacks. One of the things that we need to recognize, you can take territory away, we can kill people, but it's very, very difficult to kill this kind of, violent ideology. And as long as this ideology persists, it's going to continue to be able to regenerate and to be able to rebound even after they take losses in different places. And indeed, over the last decade, we've seen it expand, and alarmingly so in Africa. Pretty much Africa has become their most successful place of growing and expanding.
Yeah, well, this is the kind of things we are hearing exactly now about Hamas in Gaza, about destroying the ideology or physically the military apparatus. But I want to ask, is there a serious danger of a comeback by ISIS, like in the size and impact we knew before?
I believe that it is possible for them to, again, conquer large swaths of territory and again set up a caliphate. And whether that's again in Iraq and Syria, whether it's in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or whether it's in Africa, it remains to be seen. But it is certainly possible, as long as this ideology continues to exist, continues to recruit new people, and continues to motivate them to want to conquer and expand their grip on populations.
We saw a remarkable, unique international cooperation against ISIS, but it's a different world now, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, they're able to take advantage of those fractures and splits. And we've seen them, attempting to orchestrate and really motivate grassroots people to attack in the West. We've had a number of cells rolled up recently in Europe and the United States, but then we've also seen attacks as widespread as Moscow. We've seen Dagestan, we've seen Iran, we've seen Istanbul. So that, they're very busy and they're able to kind of use these geopolitical fault lines in order to, in some ways, they're trying to also exasperate the geopolitical fault lines as well.
In case the war in the Middle East spreads to Lebanon, Syria, and who knows where else, this is something that could benefit ISIS?
Absolutely. They're still at war with the Assad regime in Syria. And so anything that significantly weakens the Assad regime and they're, basically the Russian helpers there, the people that have really kept the Assad regime in power, anything that weakens them, that kind of weakens that Shia access, that includes Hezbollah and others in the region, really does give the Islamic State more room to grow and expand their power.
All right, Scott Stewart, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. More than 100 victims of the October 7th attack by Hamas are suing Iran, Syria, and North Korea, demanding at least $4 billion in damages. We are joined by Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, ADL. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You decided, the ADL, to back this lawsuit in an American court against Iran, Syria, and North Korea. What do you expect to get out of this?
Well, look, we're living in a moment when not just Israel, but the world is still recovering from the bloodiest terror attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It wasn't just an attack on Israel, although it was, or Jews, although it was. It's also an attack on America, on the Western world, on democracy as we know it. So there were 100+ Americans on whose behalf we filed this suit yesterday in a federal court in D.C. And we are going to, number one, we are going to ensure that the Islamic Republic of Iran, Syria, and North Korea are held accountable for helping Hamas commit this ugly homicidal act of atrocity. That's number one. Number two, we will get financial recompense for these victims. We will use the seized assets of these terror-supporting nations to ensure that these families, we can never alleviate their pain, but we can get them some compensation. And number three, we will prove conclusively for the world to see that actions have consequences, and history will remember the terror-supporting regime in Tehran for the barbarians that they really are.
But practically, suing North Korea, do they have assets in the United States?
Look, there's a fund in the United States, the U.S. Fund for the Victims of State-Sponsored Terror. We are going to use the money from that fund to compensate these victims. And our researchers at ADL, along with the law firm of Kroll and Mooring, they have done the analysis. We have looked at the evidence. We'll be presenting it in an open court of law that proves that North Korea, along with Syria and Iran, provided training, technical expertise, munitions, finance for the Hamas terrorists who raped, murdered so many people on that day. There are 100+ Americans who were either killed, raped, maimed, brutalized, and we're going to be standing up for all of them in this court.
How are you going to prove the connection, the North Korean connection, the Syrian connection, the Iranian connection? I guess it's easy.
Look, Hamas for years has bragged about the weapons and training they have gotten from Tehran. And by the way, Tehran has bragged about being the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. Syria has bragged about being a patron of Hamas, and Hamas has bragged about what they've gotten from them. We also have evidence that has been recovered in Gaza, evidence of North Korean munitions and weapons that Hamas used. They got them, not in the souk. They got them from North Korea. That's what we're going to demonstrate.
All right, I want to ask you about anti-Semitism in America, which you, the ADL, are gauging all the time. How bad is it?
It's bad. We have seen record levels of anti-Jewish acts of harassment, vandalism, and violence. Just this weekend, masked activists stood in front of the house of a U.S. congressman outside of Chicago and harassed him and his family in the dead of night. I've talked to so many Jewish people all over the country who've experienced the kind of intimidation and menacing that should never happen. So we're worried, but we're acting. We are not going to sit back. We are not the Jews of the trembling knees, if you will. So I'm going to tell you, we're pushing to change the laws to prevent people from masking themselves and concealing their identities so they can intimidate Jewish people. Number two, we're pushing for the federal government to take concrete action to hold these people accountable. And number three, we're going right after the anti-Zionist organizations. We will do everything that we can to expose them, to handicap them, and to literally drag these people into the ground, because what they're doing is not just promoting anti-Zionism, they're promoting hate against Jews, and that is absolutely wrong.
We are in an election year. We have just a few months before November. You saw the presidential debate. I haven't heard any word about anti-Semitism there so much. Have you?
Well, anti-Semitism did not come up in the debate, although support for Israel did. I mean, the good news on this very narrow topic is that both candidates have taken strong positions against anti-Semitism. I was pleased a week or two ago when President Biden spoke out against the anti-Semitic riot that happened in front of a synagogue in Los Angeles. I'm glad that President Trump has consistently called it out. There is a place in America to advocate for Israelis and for Palestinians. There is a place in America to demand that the hostages come home now and to express compassion for Palestinians. But there is no place in America to intimidate people because of where they pray or where they're from. And so these anti-Israel activists, these pro-Hamas activists, I'm glad that both political parties are counting them out. And by the way, the candidates who espouse this line, they're losing the elections. You saw Jamal Bowman just lost in New York. Cori Bush is going to lose in Missouri. They are losing because the American people stand with Israel and the American people stand against terror, whether it's happening on a college campus or out in the region.
Jonathan Greenblatt, ADL, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. A few international organizations and special envoys from nearly 24 countries met with Taliban officials in Doha, Qatar. And this is an effort to make some changes in Afghanistan. Journalist Shakib Nazari is with us now from Kabul. Thank you very much for joining us. What were they hoping to achieve, in your opinion, in this meeting?
Taliban were not on an easy task to attend the Doha third meeting and engage with the international community, but they have their demands. And in this Doha meeting, the Taliban spokesperson was the head of the delegation, which was sent by the Taliban supreme leader, had three wishes from the international community. The first one was to remove and also lift all the sanctions from the Taliban and the private economic sectors. The second was that to unfreeze the block currency and monies of the Afghanistan previous government, which was blocked by the international community. And the third was to engage with the Taliban by fixing anti-narcotics and anti-terrorist groups to counter them.
Well, not much was accomplished, evidently, in these talks. But I want to ask you, what changes, what concessions can the Taliban bring to the table, if at all?
They have lots of the achievements by their side that they have broadcasted on the Doha third meeting, especially on the anti-narcotic sides. And they are proud that they have done these works on anti-narcotics and also the other anti-Taliban groups who are targeting the Taliban, and also they are a threat on the international community, especially on the region, on Pakistan side, and they are just controlling and defeating those sections. And they believe that these works have they done by these 3 years are the biggest achievement for them to win this game on the Doha third.
And so far, would you say the Taliban regime is moving in any direction other than what we saw when they took over again?
Taliban 2.0 or the update Taliban has been changed. It's not the change that we mentioned on the positive sides. It's been a little bit changed due to the international community pressure and also the media pressure that they have facing right now. And if there was no international pressure and media pressure, they will be the the past Taliban, as they had killing everyone and also torturing some peoples while they are not praying on the 5 times of prayer according to the Islamic religion. And right now they're just a little bit changed, and they want engagement with the international community, and all the international community in this world don't have that section to choose between the good and the bad. Because right now, every Afghan women are also in a deep depression while they ban everything for them. And this is one of the biggest reasons that Taliban hasn't changed. But on the de facto government playing and also being a player on the governmental issues, they have been achieved lots of things. They are controlling everything on this ground.
Yeah. As you probably know, hundreds of thousands of Afghanis are about to be expelled from Pakistan. What would be the effect of that?
But it's not just only the Pakistan government that they are deporting Afghans. Also, Iran is one of the other countries which are deporting Afghans. And today, more than 800 Afghans have been deported from Iran to Afghanistan. And according to the Ministry of Refugee of the Taliban, more than 1 million Afghans has been deported in this 6 months till now. And it will be continuing through these next months, and it will face lots of economical issues and crisis for other Afghans who are living in cities and also in districts, because we don't have anything much better life out on the districts. Only the cities have a little bit work, but the districts don't have. And while these people are deporting from the neighboring countries to the Kabul or to other big cities, there will be lots of challenges. And also there is one thing more that we must mention, that we don't have any specific details of those Afghans which are the real Afghans or the other members of the anti-countries like TTP, which are the anti-militant group against the Pakistan government, or the Jaish or another anti-Irani military forces. We don't have these details that while they are entering Afghanistan, who are they? Are they the real Afghans who have been immigrants from Afghanistan in the past 2 or 3 decades, or they are just making fake documents that they are Afghans and deporting by the other countries to Afghanistan?
Right. Shakib Nazari in Kabul, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Meanwhile, women under the Taliban regime are suffering. Anna Koren has more on that.
Huddled on the floor over school books, 16-year-old Azo meticulously copies the English sentences. Her neat, cursive writing, a display of devotion to furthering her education. Learning new words makes me happy, she explains. But this scene was unthinkable just 8 months ago when we first met Azo in the same room on the outskirts of Karachi in Pakistan. Don't worry, you'll be fine, says her brother, kissing her hand. We are with you always. Azo was bedridden, her skeletal frame wasting away. Every breath she took and movement she made causing unbearable pain. Azo is from neighbouring Afghanistan. And it's there in her home in July of last year she tried to kill herself.
Can you talk to us about...
This is the first time the teenager, whose identity is hidden due to security concerns, is able to speak to us about what led her to that point. On that day, I felt like everything was over. I glanced at pictures of my classmates and felt a deep sense of longing. I was overwhelmed by hopelessness, and that's why I drank battery acid, convinced it would end my life. Azo, seen here in pink in happier times, is one of countless Afghan girls who have attempted suicide. an alarming trend spreading across the country since the Taliban returned to power almost 3 years ago. A ban on secondary education for girls, one of the most damaging of dozens of edicts enforced by the Taliban, contributing to what human rights activists describe as the most serious women's rights crisis in the world. A call backed up by UN officials.
The Taliban's institutionalized system of gender oppression, established and enforced through its violations of women and girls' fundamental rights, is widespread and systematic, amounting to crimes against humanity.
But despite this powerful language, the UN has appeased the Taliban for the UN conference on Afghanistan in Doha, agreeing to its demands that women's rights are off the official agenda, guaranteeing its attendance for the very first time. Nor will Afghan women be represented in Taliban meetings.
This is shocking and shameful behavior, and this really represents a huge win for the Taliban, honestly, in terms of how much power they're able to exercise, how much the international community is allowing their conduct, their abuses to be normalized. And this is really devastating for Afghan women.
Especially for girls like Arzo. After her suicide attempt, she was vomiting blood and couldn't swallow. Her siblings smuggled her into Pakistan for treatment at a local hospital, but Arzo's condition only worsened.
The rising number of girls turning to suicide out of their despair.
When our story aired in December, a highly respected institution in Pakistan that wishes to remain anonymous contacted CNN, offering Arzo proper medical care that would ultimately save her life.
Her weight was that of probably a 4-year-old. She was 20 to 22 kilograms at the time that we saw her. There's no doubt in my mind that she had only a few months or left to live, really.
By consuming battery acid, Arzo suffered what's called an esophageal stricture, a narrowing of the esophagus, stopping food from passing to her stomach. Over several procedures, doctors inflated a tiny balloon inside her esophagus to gradually widen the passage, allowing her to eat. In January this year, she ate her first meal of rice and milk. It was delicious. I felt strong at that moment and so happy. I told myself I could get through these hard days.
This is it for Middle East Now. Stay tuned for The Rundown with Benita Levine. Have a good night from Tel Aviv.
I have been recognized as a COPD patient for the past 20 years. As a children's artist, it was really difficult for me to go on stage and to hop and dance. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was missing oxygen. Today with the device, I feel like I was reborn. I was at the doctor's office. He sent me to do a test, and of course, I'm not sick anymore. I feel like I can hop, dance, breathe, and I work almost every day, so it requires me a lot of strength. I feel my life were saved thanks to this device.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I-24 News.
I-24 News launches its 4th channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I-24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
On today's program, Israeli fighter jets, helicopters and drones strike targets in Gaza overnight. 2 Israeli soldiers are killed in fighting in central parts of the Strip. At the same time, Israel's defense minister green lights a move to address the basic humanitarian needs of displaced civilians in the Palestinian enclave. We speak to a security expert. Tensions are high in the West Bank. An Israeli is shot and wounded while hiking on Tuesday. The IDF is operating in Nablus at the moment, and overnight 15 suspects are arrested and ammunition is confiscated during a security operation in a refugee camp. I-24 News is on the ground. And a simulation exercise is conducted by the IDF's newly formed Mountains Brigade, preparing for a possible offensive against Hezbollah inside Lebanon. It's the first such exercise for troops set to operate in the rugged Mount Hermon and Mount Dov region. We go live to the north for the latest updates on the ground. This is the rundown. I'm Benita Levine, standing in for Kalev Ben David. The IDF is today reiterating that it is committed to completing all its goals in the war against Hamas, a war started by the terror group on the 7th of October. Benjamin Netanyahu also saying Israel will finish the war only after it's achieved all its goals, including the destruction of Hamas and the release of all of the hostages. The Prime Minister hitting back at a New York Times article suggesting the IDF was low on munitions and was willing to accept a ceasefire even if it meant Hamas would remain in power in the Strip. Meanwhile, on the ground, work is underway to boost electric power to a desalination plant in Gaza. Security officials say this is critical for Israel to continue its operations against the terror group and avert a humanitarian crisis. The move was approved by the Defense Minister and Energy Minister. Officials say the plant will be immediately disconnected if the military sees Hamas siphoning off electricity. Our correspondent Nicole Zedek has more in this report.
Power work underway in Gaza. These electricians are repairing a main power line in Deir al-Balach, all in a coordinated effort with Israel to boost power to a desalination plant. The new boost could provide 20,000 cubic meters of water daily. That's roughly 20 million liters straight to the humanitarian zone, where some 1.9 million Palestinians are currently seeking shelter. The move not only provides clean water for Palestinian civilians, but is also aimed at preventing diseases that could spread to Israel. However, all the benefits Israel is receiving are also benefits Hamas could be receiving. And it's a decision that's gaining criticism from far-right government officials.
We fell flat on our heads. We are restoring Gaza with our own hands before demobilization, and especially the hospitals, i.e. the terrorist centers. Mr. Prime Minister, stop this foolishness.
This comes one day after another controversial decision, the release of Shifa Hospital Director Abu Salmiya. While there's plenty of evidence pointing to Shifa as a terror hub, there wasn't enough evidence to prove the director was involved in the terror activity. Plus, no space in Israel's prison to keep holding him. But while he was released to Gaza, 120 Israelis are still held captive in the enclave. Making the decision to release Palestinian prisoners, boost power to Gaza, and overall improve the situation on the ground seemed sudden to many within Israel. We're left wondering how Israel plans to continue the war in Gaza if these resources could go straight to the hands of Hamas.
And that report by our correspondent Nicole Zedek, and she joins us now for more in studio, as does Israeli-Palestinian relations expert, Colonel in the Reserves, Grisha Yakubovich, the former head of the Civilian Department of Kogat in the IDF. Thank you so much for being here in studio. Israel boosting power to this desalination plant in Gaza, obviously trying to avert a humanitarian crisis. Grisha, your thoughts on the strategy here? How does it work?
I want to go back a little bit. A day before October 7th, Israel supplied 38% of the electricity consumption in Gaza by 10 lines. Israel supplied 20 million cubic meters of water to the Gaza Strip, and Israel also supplied all the communications with the world for the Gazans. 100% of the households in Gaza were connected somehow to internet. Who paid for it? The Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian Authority implemented sanctions against Hamas in Gaza because of the fact that only in June they've celebrated 16 years after the coup in Gaza, when they butchered and slaughtered Fatah officials in Gaza. Israel fights according to Western values. So yes, at the beginning there were statements that said that we will bring them back to the Stone Age or something like that. But this is not who we are. And to gain legitimacy and to continue fighting with our values, we have no other option than to do whatever is necessary. First, to provide a solution to the people, that they will not die out of thirst, that there will be no diseases in Gaza. This is how we will gain support from the international community. We need them now more than ever when we are facing a multi-arena possible war, and the whole area is prepared for two options. One, a diplomatic solution between Israel and Hezbollah and Iran, or the first Middle East war. So we need our allies. And if we want to have our allies with us, we need to get them backing us. Number three, sewage. If sewage is not treated, it's diseases. Four, it provides you also a window of operational opportunity, that this will be like a balloon, okay, an area in the district of Deir al-Balach, that all the people will actually be closer there, and we will be able to save more lives. And in the rest of the Gaza Strip, we will be able to complete the mission and to eliminate the enemy.
Something critical. Humanitarian crises inside the Palestinian enclave would impact soldiers who are fighting there, not to mention Israeli hostages who are being held there as well.
Exactly, because as Israel is doing this, and it absolutely does save face in the international realm, and Israel is doing everything they can to increase the humanitarian efforts, and this is another step in that is desperately needed, but it does not just help the Palestinian civilians, it absolutely helps the Israeli soldiers who are fighting there, and then, as the Israeli government also says, it could help the 120 hostages who are also held in Gaza right now. If there's a disease outbreak down there, it's not going to look good for anyone that's in Gaza.
I want to add one thing. Okay, as the war continues, okay, let's not forget that. Well, one of the things that Israel wants to avoid is to get the full civil responsibility on the Gaza Strip. But this is a contradiction, because as long as the war continues, and Philadelphia, that border between Gaza and Egypt, is under Israeli let's say, in Israeli hands, the obligation, according to the international law, to provide civil solutions to the Gaza Strip will actually will grow as day goes by. So, in one hand, we need to avoid from getting this full responsibility, and on the other hand, we need to find a way how to avoid this humanitarian crisis. And what I see is the beginning of stage 3. The IDF will complete the mission. There are some reports that even Al Jazeera reported from Walla that the IDF increases the corridor of Netzarim from 2 kilometers to 4 kilometers. And let's add to that Israel will withdraw to the borders, to the Green Line, and will implement the modus operandi that is implemented in the West Bank. So, supplying some humanitarian abilities to be able to continue fight terror in the future in a different way.
There are also reports that patients and staff have fled from Gaza's European hospital in Khan Yunis after the Israeli army ordered residents nearby to evacuate. What does that tell you, Krisha?
It means that the operation in Rafah is about to be completed, and maybe the next step is Khan Yunis. And there's a very clear message here that is really important to the people of Gaza. The IDF evacuated you because of one fact: Hamas launched rockets from your neighborhoods, from your houses. The moment they will do that, we will immediately evacuate you, if it will be the 2nd, the 3rd, or the 10th time. And this is the message of how the reality will look like in the Gaza Strip in the future. From where they will launch, the IDF will enter, and you will have to move again. So, one hand gives electricity, operating the water, treating with sewage, and the other hand is a hand that will hit bad, or they will hit them badly, if they will launch from there.
We're going to unpack more of that in a very short while. Stay with us. We now turn to the West Bank. A shooting attack on this day. An Israeli hiker was wounded while hiking in the community of Har Bracha and was rushed to hospital in the city of Kfar Saba. The IDF is operating in Nablus at the moment. Meanwhile, overnight, Israeli security forces arresting 15 suspects across the West Bank, confiscating ammunition and weapons parts. Also on Monday, confirmation that one Israeli soldier was killed and another was seriously wounded when an explosive device detonated under a military vehicle during an operation in a refugee camp near the city of Tulkarem. So for the latest, we go to correspondent Zach Anders. He joins us from Har Bracha in the West Bank as we see the sun setting behind you there. Zach, we know a manhunt is underway after an Israeli was shot and wounded while hiking. What can you tell us?
Yeah, and this a man believed to be in his 30s. The injury sustained not life-threatening. The real question this afternoon, where exactly did the shooting take place? It was told that he was in a position near where we are, that this is a scenic overlook looking into the city of Nablus. The IDF and the security forces here in the area say that the shooting occurred from down in those buildings, from in the populated area of Nablus, in the urban area, I should say, out into this open area where he was hiking around one of the scenic areas. With this, it's a bit confusing because this was initially described through IDF sources as a sniper shot, but still the distance that was would be needed to take out a shot like this, tremendous amount of distance here, thousands of yards we're talking about. So when we did arrive on scene, we saw the IDF forces in the area were searching through the hillside. And some of the conversations that we've had lead us to believe that it's much more plausible that this is a shot that took place from in the hillside or in some of the vegetation. It's really not clear at this point. What is clear, though, is that no one's been apprehended. At least that's what the IDF is telling us. There have been some sort of exchange of gunfire in and around Nablus, with the IDF conducting some sort of operation. They say as many as 4 Palestinian men have been shot. It's not clear what the extent of their injuries are, or really anything that's happened in this exchange of gunfire, whether IDF forces came under fire as well. The IDF says none of their forces suffered any casualties, no injuries there. But really a strange day here in and around Nablus, coming off a night where some 15 were arrested inside the city you see behind me. The IDF says they were charged with terrorism. And during a raid-like operation, the ground forces went in, arrested these men, suffered no casualties. There was some sort of exchange of gunfire. They also say they discovered a cache of weapons and a lathe that's been used to manufacture ammunition, and that both of those were destroyed as well. But again, to recap, that Israeli man that was shot this afternoon expected to be okay. 4 Palestinian men shot in the aftermath of this in a search for whoever was the original perpetrator of this shooting. And at this point in the night, no word yet whether or not that man has been, or whoever was behind it, has been apprehended.
And that manhunt continues. Thank you so much. Correspondent Zach Anders at Har Bracha in the West Bank. Grisha Yakubovich still here in studio. Your sense of the temperature on the ground in the West Bank as we speak, and the role that the Palestinian Authority security forces are having potentially in quelling tensions as we speak?
Well, first of all, this round of violence in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, started in May 2021. It was actually started before the war with Hamas. And since then, this wave of violence is just growing. And the last few months, this is something that is backed by Iran, and we see that. We see that with the types of weapons. We see that with the size of the charges that exploded. We just mentioned that a soldier got killed in Nur Shams. And you can see we can see the number of the events also on a daily basis growing. So there's huge attempts by Iran to smuggle weapons from Syria to Jordan, from Jordan to the West Bank. The PA are also trying to do some, I would say, I don't know how efficient they are, but they are charged as the ones who cooperate with Israel. They just confiscated in Tubas a few charges that were made by those Islamic Jihad terrorists. And unfortunately, it looks like the West Bank, Judea and Samaria is on the edge of a third intifada.
Well, that is certainly a disturbing prospect. We will talk about that in more detail in a short while. But first, let's go to the north now. Another barrage of Hezbollah rockets launched from southern Lebanon towards northern Israel. Red alert sirens sounding in Kiryat Shmona and surrounds in recent hours. For more, we cross to correspondent Pierre Kloschendler in northern Israel. And Pierre, we're hearing some 15 Hezbollah rockets were launched from Lebanon at Kiryat Shmona in recent hours. Also, the Israeli army shooting down a suspected drone over South Lebanon. What is the latest? What is confirmed?
Well, after the rocket salvos, there were actually 2 salvos of 15 to 20 rockets, and you can see the result. Some of the rockets, or the intercepted rockets, fell into an open field, and you can see that the firefighters, 8 units at all, are trying to put down the fire, because you see that the fire is really very close to the residential buildings of Kiryat Shmona, as you can see right now. There were 2 salvos of rockets. Some fell into an open field, but most were intercepted. And previously to that, there were 2 drones infiltrations that were intercepted above the Lebanese skies in the vicinity of Kafar Kala in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, very close to Metula, another one near the community, the Israeli community of Malkiya. And in between the rocket salvo and the drone interceptions, there was also a targeted killing of some sort of operative west of the city of Tyre in southwest Lebanon. So another day of the war of attrition that has started with Hezbollah in October 8th, the day after the October 7 massacre, in order to create some sort of united front with the Gaza Strip. And Hezbollah said that the rocket salvo was in response to Israel's maneuvering into the Gaza Strip. So this is the result. And right now, the situation is calm for the past 3 hours, when it's not interrupted by artillery fire from the IDF nearby Kiryat Shmona. Benita?
And Pierre, as we're looking at that smoke behind you, also we know that the IDF's newly formed Mountains Brigades, set to operate in the rugged Mount Hermon and Mount Dov region in the north, has conducted its first exercise, a simulation exercise. Tell us what that means.
Well, there's been a lot of training in the north with lots of reserve and conscript soldiers in formation, in brigade formation, in battalion formation, doing their exercises in order to train on the rugged terrain that would be expected in southern Lebanon. But given that, this is also part of Israel's warning toward Hezbollah that a war could be imminent if the fire doesn't stop. Because, Israelis are debating, even in Kiryat Shmona, we heard people debating whether there's going to be a war, there's going to be some sort of arrangement. And the people are just waiting and trying to decipher what's going on, because they say if the situation is unclear, there's no way that the residents of Kiryat Shmona will come back to their homes. Right now, there's only 1 in 8 residents that has remained in Kiryat Shmona.
Correspondent Pierre Kloschendler, live from northern Israel. Thank you so much for that update. Colonel in the reserves, Grisha Yakubovich, your take on those exercises. What does it tell you? Briefly, please.
First of all, the equation is kept. Both sides, Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Israel, showed only 10% from their abilities. So yes, Hezbollah exercised in the past, and we've seen that. Now the IDF is doing the same thing. A Lebanese source said the following today. There are 2 options. One, there are a lot of discussions in Europe. Even Hochstein reached to France, so trying to reach to some positive result. And with the same breath, the resistance is prepared for a full-scale war. And I think that we are actually in a very crucial weeks to see how will it end up.
There's also, we heard today from Hezbollah's deputy chief, Naim Qassem, in an interview with the Associated Press, when we're talking about the war in Gaza, Hezbollah says it will continue as long as the war in Gaza continues. But the minute a ceasefire is declared, they reiterated today that the fighting on the north will stop. But the possibility right now that Israeli troops might withdraw from Gaza without fully declaring a ceasefire, that's becoming more and more talked about in Israel. And now the second deputy chief from Hezbollah says if that happens, it's unclear what's going to happen in the north. If we see a less slower fighting in Gaza, but not a full ceasefire, then the northern front is still a full possibility. And they say that we'll continue to have to back the Palestinian brothers in Gaza.
30 seconds, party.
It's a catch. It's a catch that we have to be careful. We need to withdraw and to reach to stage C without stating that we withdrew from the Gaza Strip. So they will have no reason to say that we started the attack. This is the catch.
And with that catch, we thank you so much, Israeli-Palestinian relations expert, Colonel in the Reserves, Grisha Yakubovich. Thank you as always for being here in studio. Nicole, you're going to be staying with us. Thank you so much. And now we turn to the agonizing wait for the families of the 120 hostages held captive in Gaza for nearly 9 months now. It's still not clear how many of the hostages are alive. The youngest hostages are baby Kfir Bibas and his brother Ariel, abducted with their mother Shiri on the 7th of October. Their father, Yarden, is also in captivity. His sister, Ofri Bibas Levi, speaking to our I24 News Hebrew channel. Here's part of her conversation with colleague Miri Michaeli. Let's take a listen.
Congratulations, Ofri.
Thanks.
How was the birth?
Well, it was pretty quick.
Is this your third?
Yes, this pregnancy, as moving, miraculous, and joyful as it was, has accompanied me throughout this period since October. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after October 7th, so I never had the chance to announce it to Yarden and Shiri. And the weeks of pregnancy followed the countdown of our fight to get them home. But this is our life since October 7th. Everything is mixed up. The joy is never complete. The sadness is always present. The routine is always broken up by some event.
There is something in these images of Shiri protecting Fear and Ariel that touches any mother deeply. I think of all the women, the mothers, the young mothers who have just given birth to children in this country. But for you, it's the story of your family.
I did not experience this pregnancy as I would have in other circumstances. I have to say that with all the difficulties, I thought a lot about the women whose husbands are hostages and who gave birth during this period. I tried to think about how they dealt with this situation. Luckily, my husband is with me, and my children too. I'm helped and supported. I can't even imagine what they're going through and how they're coping with all this uncertainty. Bringing a child into the world without knowing where his father is and how he's doing. I hear many women around me who say the trauma of October 7th made them want to have more children. I also hear opposing voices who say they don't want to bring children into this completely crazy world. This forces us to think about this world, about the cruelty that takes place there. In a way, we've accepted living from war to war, and that's a difficult thought, to think that war is a reality in this country. I would love to see us create the conditions for a better future for everyone.
I think you're being summoned.
Yes, I'll give him a bottle.
I have to tell you, he's beautiful. He's so cute.
Yes, he's cute all the time. Everything that happens underlines what's missing. For example, when you leave the delivery room, you want to send a message to everyone you know.
Did you miss Yarden at that time?
I really missed Yarden and Shiri at that time. I knew that if I had sent a message to Yarden, he would have replied with an unfunny joke, or would have made fun of me in some way. Shiri, as a mother, would have asked me how the birth went, what weight was he born at, and all the slightly technical details that we women are used to asking. Then came the time for the circumcision. You look around. They're not there.
How did you cope during this time leading up to the birth, with all that was going on?
We have no other choice. I'm not the problem in this story. It's not about me. They're the story. They are still there. They are the ones suffering, not me. They are the ones who are suffering and who must be saved. If I hadn't had my children, if I hadn't been pregnant, I probably would have moved to Tel Aviv during this time and taken a much more active part in the struggle. This word, combat, bothers me a lot, that we, families of hostages, had to fight. Who are we fighting against? Why should I fight? I fight for the rights of my brother and his family to be free, to get out of this hell. I shouldn't have to fight. It should be obvious that they should be here.
What change are you hoping for?
Let them do everything. And I know they're not doing everything. We know what should be done, but they run away. And meanwhile, we know the hostages are dying. We know the conditions they have to survive. To say that they live there is not an appropriate word. They survive at best. They don't live there. It's not life there. Being 9 months in a tunnel is not life. The next date we are waiting for is Ariel's birthday. He'll be 5 years old. We've already had all the family birthdays.
They don't talk to you? They don't keep you informed? They don't have anything definite to tell you, but there is this statement from Benny Gantz, who said that Israel knows about your families and that they will reveal this information when conditions allow.
I really don't know what's behind this statement. It was unwelcome and irresponsible. It only upset the families. They always assure us that what they know, we know too. All we know for now is that they're not sure of anything. So we hold on this uncertainty, and we try to keep the hope that there is still a chance.
What you say is incredible. We hear so many hints. I'm not talking about Hamas's statements, of course. And you, from your point of view, you know nothing.
Until we know something for certain, we'll continue to fight for them, as if they were alive. No one gives up on their family.
Have you watched the films with Yarden?
Yes, I've seen them all.
Wow. Okay. Wow, you've devastated me. I don't know him, and I had a lot of trouble watching them. How could you?
We got the first film thanks to the freed hostages. This is the first time I saw Yarden. I had to see it. I needed it. I had to hear his voice. The video of the kidnapping. I don't wish for anyone to watch a person they love in such a situation of fear and violence. Imagine what's going through their mind. Even if it's very sad, I'm certain that every family is waiting for these Hamas films. They're terrible, this psychological terror. But it's the wish of every family to see them for a moment, thanks to these films. But as time goes by, we've established a certain routine. They're there, and we continue here. Not just us, the entire public who struggles with us. We weren't supposed to fight. We weren't supposed to fight this long. Hostages come first. But it's become a fight for our country. This is how I see it.
I can only imagine how hard it is when everyone is involved in your personal story, which has become the story of an entire country.
Yes, and sometimes I feel like screaming, no, enough, they're mine. Yarden is mine, leave him. He's my brother, he's no one else's brother. But it's reinforcing and moving to see all these initiatives that people take so that we don't forget them. It could just be 2 little orange candles lit for Shabbat. I received this from the United States a few days ago, knowing that people think of them all the time. There was a race organized in New York. Who could have imagined that Ariel would become a famous Batman? I'm really grateful for everything people are doing, but I also want to scream, stop, bring them back. Since October, and especially since the first release agreement where many hostages returned, we're constantly living between hope and despair. This feeling that there could be a solution, and all these statements from the Prime Minister and other ministers who ultimately say, no, we're not going to do what an agreement that would allow their release provides. I don't think these statements are naive. I really think there is a desire not to reach an agreement, and every time it fails.
Why do you think leaders might not want to reach an agreement?
It seems more important to them, for now, to save the government rather than the hostages. I see no other explanation. It's 9 months since October. The IDF is still in Gaza. The rockets are still raining down. The north is burning. We're not in a more favorable situation than we were a few months ago. This need for an agreement is first and foremost the return of the hostages, but it's much more than that.
When you hear, not just from Israeli officials, but from Blinken, that we need to put pressure on Hamas, that Israel is ready to make a deal, it feels like an impasse.
That's why I say Israel is supposedly ready, and then we hear public statements heard by Hamas that say the opposite. This game is beyond me, and I don't understand why we're playing with the life of my brother and his family. We feel like there's no plan.
We feel that you are very restrained.
I no longer cry in interviews. A little before my delivery, when I was talking about how I wanted them to be there for the circumcision as the birth approached, I cried again. I have a lot of opportunities to cry. Little things that remind us they're not here. A song, a photo.
What songs remind you of your family?
I think of Yasmin Moalem, He Won't Leave Me Alone. There's a line in this song that says, we're just two brothers. I hope he doesn't leave me alone.
Heartbreaking indeed. Meanwhile, the mother of Noah Marciano, the Israeli hostage who was murdered inside the Shifa hospital, has spoken to our sister Hebrew channel, Adi Marciano, telling colleague Miri Michaeli how she felt when she heard the director of that hospital, Mohammed Abu Salmiya, was one of 55 prisoners released in recent days due to overcrowding in Israeli prisons. He had been arrested for sheltering Hamas terrorists and holding hostages at the Shifa complex, and he is now back at home. Let's listen to some of that discussion.
First of all, I'd like to offer you my sincere condolences. I see you are close to where your daughter is buried. How did you learn of the release of the director of Shifa Hospital?
From the media, who called me. You know, it's the natural continuation of what we've been experiencing since October 7th.
What do you mean?
No one warned us in advance. We are surprised every time by this neglect by the authorities, this contempt, and this lack of information surrounding the fate of our daughter.
She was taken with other hostages to the hospital. Perhaps she hoped they would be taken care of there. What do you know about the circumstances of her death?
Noah arrived at Shifa Hospital. She was not alone. Other hostages were with her. We know today that there were already other hostages who arrived before her. And you know, a hospital, everyone knows the function of a hospital. But when she arrived at the hospital, they didn't decide to save her. They did not decide to keep her alive. The decision of Hamas, of the assassins, the decision of the moment, forsaking her, taking revenge, they saw her as a burden like all the other hostages. My Noah was a victim. One of the doctors there made the decision. I don't know if it was his own decision or that of others, but people not involved are involved. He decided to kill her.
From a communications point of view, this decision to release the hospital director is likely to discredit all of Israel's attempts to explain that everything that happened in Shifa is far from taking care of the sick. Are you thinking about it? Does it worry you?
If we are still at the same point where they decide for us we have a problem, if there is no organized list with the names of people who can be released, what have we done so far? I'm really angry. If we had been warned before that there was an agreement planned, a plan we didn't know, believe me, we would have kept everything to ourselves. As we keep many things secret, we would have been grateful, and we parents would not have felt despised.
When you see that the authorities are blaming each other, what do you feel?
And I say to myself, you still haven't determined who makes the decisions? You still haven't taken stock of the event? You still don't understand? How much longer will it take you to understand? There are families whose world has collapsed. There are families who will not recover.
I don't want to talk with you only about the release of this terrorist. Tell us something about Noah, something joyful about her life, not just about this terrible ending.
I knew she would do things right, that she would go far, but someone evil put an end to her dreams, ended our lives. I have never highlighted the merits of my daughter, and I regret it. She deserves it. She deserves that we're proud of her. She always knew that I was proud of her, but I never showed it publicly because she didn't want it. She was a modest young girl. I learned of the things she had done for others, for children and youth movements, for her close friends. She did a lot for others, but it was always discreetly because that's how Noah was. Noah was a discreet leader. Noah was someone life misses. The world has lost some goodness. So much good disappeared that Saturday and continues to disappear. It is said that they are chosen with a fine comb, that the best are leaving. Today I understand the meaning of this sentence, because it's true. I hear Noah's voice all the time, telling me, Mom, there's always good people among you, and you must also preserve them. You must do everything so that good prevails. Do everything to change things. We want peace. We want the guilty to admit their responsibility and their guilt. Let them free up space for people who can offer us a slightly better future. We don't deserve anything else. We don't deserve this.
So much pain. Indeed. And now a quick update on this story. The state comptroller may launch a probe into the release of the hospital director at Shifa, Mohammed Abu Salmiya. Netanyahu Engelman saying a short while ago he will ask that the Prime Minister provide him with any material that comes out of internal investigations. No doubt many questions remain about exactly what unfolded there. And still with me in studio is our correspondent, Nicole Zedek. And I want to turn, Nicole, to another devastating development. Israelis waking up to the news this morning. The mother of rescued hostage Noah Argamani Liora had passed away from cancer.
Yes.
Heartbreaking.
It really is. And it's bittersweet in a sense, because her mother has been suffering from terminal brain cancer for such a long time, and she had been very vocal since her daughter had been kidnapped.
Pleading to see her.
Pleading publicly, saying, my dying wish is so that I can see my daughter back here in Israel once more. And she got that wish just several weeks ago, last month, in the heroic rescue mission that saw Noah rescued along with 3 other hostages. And so while we're hearing from the eulogy from Noah herself today, I want to read you just one of the things that she said during her eulogy. She said, "Thank you for being strong and holding on so that I could see you one last time." It went both ways with this mother and daughter, because the strength that it took for Liori to keep going so that she could see her daughter one more time, it's also the strength that Noah needed in captivity in Hamas so that she could see her mother one more time. So it's heartbreaking, but knowing that they did have that reunion is certainly bittersweet when it comes to this news.
And certainly seeing those pictures, we all felt like we knew Liora and the pain waiting for word on her daughter, who of course rescued in that brazen operation last month, that rescue operation. But Nicole, that brings me to my next question. There are still 120 hostages somewhere in the Gaza Strip. We know not all of them are alive. Hamas has yet to give any proof of life. So we are still, as a nation, waiting for word. And we hear about this elusive deal, this ceasefire hostage deal. Where do things stand right now?
Right now, earlier in the day, actually, this is all a deal that right now is still being backed by the United States. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken actually held a phone call with his Emirati counterpart to discuss the ongoing hostage ceasefire deal. But really, that's what it is at this point, it seems. It's ongoing talks, really pushed by the United States, pushed by some of their other Arab partners in the region, some other partners in the region, pushing for these sides. But when it comes down to the deal that the U.S. President Joe Biden himself presented, saying that this is an Israeli-backed deal, well, just a few weeks ago, it was Hamas that declined that deal. And so they're still trying to push forward to try and see some way, but the main sticking points remain that Hamas wants a complete ceasefire and withdrawal of Israeli troops. And the current government, the leadership, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, says that will not happen. We will continue to fight until Hamas no longer functions as a capable body inside the Gaza Strip. So right now, as you mentioned, really elusive ceasefire talks. They're still happening behind closed doors, but nothing really that we can talk about substantially on the table.
One cannot imagine what this wait means for the families of these hostages. And also questions remain around potential pressure that should be being put on Hamas as we speak to accept that proposal. Correspondent Nicole Zedek, thank you so much for all your updates and insight. Appreciate you being here in studio. Now, the UN Security Council is today holding a briefing on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian issue, followed by a closed consultation session. The chief coordinator for humanitarian affairs and reconstruction in Gaza held a briefing just a short while ago. So for more, we cross to our senior US correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. He joins us from New York. And Mike, you were at that briefing. So tell us more about the message being shared by the chief coordinator for humanitarian affairs and reconstruction in Gaza. You had a chance to speak to her.
That's right. Sigrid Kaag, appointed by hand by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. She's a longtime diplomat and UN staffer, appointed to the role, very difficult role, obviously, of coordinating the humanitarian aid and reconstruction in Gaza. She briefed the UN Security Council on the facts on the ground today and going over some recommendations heading forward here. It was a very somber discussion with the Security Council as she laid out the humanitarian situation, telling the Council that the evacuation orders issued by Israel today could create new hunger and disease issues. She also mentioned the ever-growing risks to humanitarian workers, including the breakdown of civil order, which has been a constant topic of conversation between Israel and the UN as to who has responsibility now that there appears to be no functioning governing authority there in Gaza. The UN saying it's Israel's responsibility to ensure safe passage of humanitarian aid. Israel is laying the burden right now on the UN. And I asked Sigrid Kaag in her briefing with reporters, what has those conversations with Israeli authorities been like, given the constant tensions, especially as of late, between the UN and the Israeli governing authorities? Here was her answer to our question.
I have been well received. I keep having access to the highest levels, and I have important conversations to obviously focus on the implementation of what's so important, which is sustained flow of assistance of a broad nature into the Gaza Strip to assist civilians. Equally so to make sure that we can verify and monitor and that those take place in a correct and a constructive atmosphere, and there's an ongoing need. Members of my team are also in close contact. The first part, the tensions, as you said, it depends on which area of work you would speak to. I'll stick to what is most relevant to Security Council Resolution 2720. That is, of course, the data. We see an ongoing discussion about X number of trucks, either piling up at Kerem Shalom or the goods, and the ability of the UN actually to come and collect it and distribute it. You see a data gap there. And those are obviously different conclusions that we draw. But what's actually interesting about the establishment of the mechanism, it has one database. You can see which types of goods go in, what's approved, what's denied, and where's the follow-up. So hopefully we can also have, at least on that part, a common ground in order to fix it and to solve it, because the civilians in Gaza need as much as possible. They need it sustained, and they don't need it tomorrow, they need it way back when.
And Mike, over and above the issue of aid, what is being said at the UN about pressure on Hamas to accept the ceasefire hostage deal? We've been talking about it here in studio. What is the latest there?
The Russian government has control over the Security Council this month. The Russians are the ones running the council. And Vasily Nebenzia actually came out and spoke with reporters a short time before we talked with Kaag. And Nebenzia was asked that specific question, what about Hamas not agreeing to the ceasefire? Because he said over and over to us, the ceasefire, the ceasefire, the ceasefire. And he said just that in that manner is what's holding up the humanitarian aid. Until there's a ceasefire, nothing is really going to be solved, regardless of the efforts of Sigrid Kaag and others. He was asked, well, what pressure is being brought on Hamas? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, don't have the exact quote, that Israel needs to accept blame as well. He said that moments after Israel said that it accepted the proposal for a ceasefire, the moment that Hamas said, we'd like to talk about this, he said Israel is the one that backed out. And it shouldn't be written in stone, the proposal. There needed to be talks as part of a cooperative effort to achieve a ceasefire. Hamas wanted to talk. Israel says no. He says Israel should accept blame as well.
Live from New York, senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, thank you so much. And now, an update out of Poland, for more than 3 decades, Krakow has been holding a Jewish festival which attracts thousands of people each year. But this year, with the ongoing Israel-Hamas war in the backdrop, a shadow has been cast over the event. Robert Berman has more in this report.
35 years ago, here in Krakow, Poland, in the ancient Jewish neighborhood called Kazimierz, the annual Jewish Cultural Festival was born. Every year it draws about 10,000 people, Jews and Christians alike, to hear lectures on Jewish topics and to listen to old Jewish klezmer music and modern Israeli music. This year, however, given the Gaza war and the rise of anti-Semitism in many European countries, there was great concern that the festival would be interrupted by violent protests. Thankfully, that didn't happen.
The Krakow Jewish Festival is more than a week-long festival of concerts, lectures, workshops on an entire spectrum of Jewish culture. And then there was the big question, what was going to be like this year? Can you have a festival when there's a war going on? It's an important question. It's not a simple answer. But I do believe you need to have a festival because we don't stop celebrating, we don't stop singing, we don't stop dancing. And even if we have a broken heart, we're not going to let Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the other anti-Semites of the world stop us from celebrating and dancing. But to be able to have something like the Krakow Jewish Festival is amazing, both for Poles to be able to see what was Jewish culture like, but even more so for young Jews of Poland to feel proud. We're so proud of our history and of our culture.
Hi, my name is Sophie Lichtman. I came all the way from Manhattan, New York, to Krakow, Poland, a place I never thought I would be. And I participated in the Culture Festival as well as the Ride for the Living and the Shabbat dinner. And it was really, really inspiring and beautiful to see all of these Poles and non-Jews and Jews come together to celebrate Judaism and our culture. It really was something I couldn't have expected and never really would have imagined would happen in a place like this. And it's absolutely changed my perspective on Poland right now and on the future of Jewry here in Eastern Europe. And it was really powerful and meaningful. And it's definitely something I'll remember for a really long time.
How do you explain that there's so little anti-Israel, anti-Zionistic expression here in Poland when there's so much in almost every other country?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I think part of it is that there's a very limited sympathy for the Palestinian cause. They also remember who supported Arab countries before the fall of the Soviet Union, and there's no sympathy for the Soviet Union or for Russia here. And I think also there is a respect for Israel that could stand up to so many enemies. Poland's also surrounded by historical enemies. Germany on one side, Russia on the other. And here, Israel is much smaller and standing up and a vibrant country. There is a kind of a respect for Israel and almost a sense of a connection to Israel.
Although the festival this year was not as well as attended as years past because of the situation, it was indeed a success. Besides a little bit of graffiti and about a dozen pro-Hamas protesters, there were no incidences of violence.
Many testimonies of heroic responses to the Hamas terror onslaught on the 7th of October keep emerging. More in this report adapted from Channel 12 News.
At any point, he could have stopped and said, I did my part, I tried, I didn't succeed. They stopped me on the way there. But he was just so driven, so driven. This photo was in the middle of Ziv's living room at home.
It's in the Gaza envelope area?
Yes, it's his only photo I brought home with me.
While tens of thousands of families fought for their lives from their safe rooms on the Black Saturday, October 7th, or trying to flee north or south from the terrorists, Ziv Chopin, a 56-year-old member of Kibbutz Be'eri, bravely chose the opposite path. On Saturday morning, as the rocket barrages and sirens began, he was actually in Tel Aviv and started following the war from there.
I called him and he said to me, don't worry, I'm not in the kibbutz, I'm in Tel Aviv, drinking coffee in Tel Aviv. Of course, the first thing I told him was to come to my house, and he said okay. At 10:30, I called to see where he was, and then he told me he was in kibbutz Zikim.
אני בזיקים.
Shani, Ziv's younger sister who lives in the center of Israel, tried to convince him to stay at her place in a safe location.
חצי מטר ממני, נפל פגז בצד השני של הכביש, כל הדברים באוטו עפו לי. איזה כיף, אלוהים אוהב אותך, אתה לא מבין איך נפעל.
We reached Kfar Maimon. They didn't let him in. His car got hit by a mortar and almost flew in the air. I told him, okay, all of this has just happened. Now come back home, please.
עכשיו אני תקוע, לא נותנים לי לעבור, אני לא יודע מה קורה אצלנו.
למה אתה רוצה להגיע לבארי אבל, זיו?
He told me, I don't understand. They're killing my friend's children, and I'm supposed to sit in the living room and watch it on the news? They're burning my house. קיבוץ בארי is my home.
בארי זה הבית שלי. אבל מה תגיע? יש שם מחבלים.
לא, נראה איך אפשר לעזור.
לא, זיו, תעשה לי טובה, אנחנו צריכים אותך, זיו. הילדים צריכים אותך, נשמה.
I told him I have 2 kids and they are so attached to him, there is no reason to leave them.
יאללה, ביי. כן, וואו, שורף.
כיפת ברזל.
He didn't sound scared. There was such a dissonance between him being in the midst of the inferno while talking to me on the phone, calming me down, so I was sure everything was okay.
During the conversations with his sister Shani, Ziv managed to pass 4 police checkpoints and reach the entrance to Kibbutz Be'eri, his home. He also tried to rescue residents and civilians who were caught in the area. Here, he is documented on the security cameras of the bicycle shop at the entrance to the kibbutz, rescuing shooting victims so they could receive medical treatment. Around 2, he volunteered to enter the terrorist-infested kibbutz.
אני בכניסה לבארי, מחכים לאיזה כוח פה שניכנס לבית של בני ערובה. למה הם לא יודעים איפה הבית, אני אכוון אותם.
Oriel Uzan is one of 8 police unit fighters who arrived on Saturday afternoon at the entrance to Be'eri in 2 armored jeeps to rescue civilians.
Ziv entered my jeep despite the horrors and the chaos. He explained everything calmly. He was very determined and wanted so much to go in and help the civilians there. He was not armed. He had a knife. And that's how we entered the kibbutz. I was in the leading jeep, and my officer, Vadim Bloch, identified 3 terrorists. We managed to kill 2 of them. One fled back into the kibbutz, and they fired an RPG at us. There was a moment of silence in the jeep, and Ziv just wanted to storm out.
The 2 jeeps were heavily fired on during the encounter. One jeep took a direct hit, and the officers were killed on the spot. Ziv and Uriel's jeep was hit, and they managed to get out and fight the terrorists. Uriel is the only survivor of the force.
I went out and stormed forward, then hid behind a vehicle, and returned fire towards the terrorists while shouting at the friends who were in the jeep to get out. This was actually the last time I saw them alive.
Ziv was murdered at this point, trying to defend his home and the members of the kibbutz he loved so much, joining the growing list of heroes who went almost knowingly to their deaths.
There's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of pride. He knew he was taking a risk. He knew he might not come back from this. But he did it anyway.
A growing list of heroes. And that is a wrap for The Rundown. Back again tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Benita Levine. Thank you for watching.